Libertarianism is an ideology built on neoclassical economics, a critique. This is a response to Unlearning Econ, or at Unlearning Econ on Twitter, by at Darjeeling Zen. And you can view the referent article at the below website, Unlearning Economics WordPress blog. It's a Friday night, and I'm doing this because Moira, Kathleen, seems to have found some interest in it, and Moira, I respect her as a very intelligent person, and, you know, if she's interested in this and she finds it as a credible critique on libertarianism, well, then I need to, make some kind of response to it. You can't go around trying to correct every error on the internet, but so I usually don't do this, but here goes. I'm not a libertarian per se. I certainly don't self-identify as such anymore, although once upon a time perhaps. And I just find that the critique that Unlearning Econ gave to libertarianism is, perhaps misguided. And I'll go from here. So as I see it, the basic frame of Unlearning Econ's fundamental argument is either neoclassical economic theory is foundational to libertarian political theory and ideology, and then neoclassical economic theory has, some severe criticisms, or the premises implicit within neoclassical economic theory are fundamentally flawed, and because they are foundational to libertarian political theory, therefore, libertarian political theory is also flawed. The bulk of Unlearning Econ's argument, as I see it at least, has little to do with libertarian theory itself, but rather arguments against what Unlearning Econ perceives as this neoclassic or neoclassicist argument. Various quotes that I'll be pulling from is free to choose becomes nonsensical once you analyze it from the premise that people are not rational. And further, people do not behave like robots, so they need strong political and social institutions that create trust and cohesion to engage in transactions. And further, Pretax income is just a money flow that has arisen due to the institutions set up by government and as a result of the way these institutions were set up. And further, libertarianism completely neglects work and workers. And still further, how do libertarians deal with the fact that their ideology is built on highly flawed theories? By mocking the real world. So, Unlearning Econ says that one of the things that has always put me off libertarianism is that it clearly has neoclassical economics at its heart. And, so this seems really more of a personal preference and a, pre-existing kind of conclusion about what libertarianism is, and so the author seems to already have been put off libertarianism, and somehow they've Unlearning Econ has somehow identified neoclassic economics as this foundation or philosophic foundation. Well, I generally think that libertarian theory is really an ethical argument, and it has an ethical argument as its philosophical foundation. And that this ethical argument that it starts with has implications that lead it to Austrian school economics as a consequence, but it really doesn't generally start with Austrian school economics. Therefore, really, at least in my view, and maybe I've misunderstood Unlearning Econ. I'll try to grant that at least. The initial assertion seems to incorrectly identify libertarian theory with neoclassical economics, and therefore what follows can only be a straw man argument, or an argument that has been, a weak argument that's been set up, that, is not the real thing that's trying to be. Let me rephrase that. A straw man argument is a weak and false argument that's been set up to be attacked as if it's the real thing that we're attacking, but really we're attacking a straw man or a fake argument that really isn't, the issue at hand and relevant to the issue at hand. Unlearning Econ says that I regard Austrianism as a wing of Neoclassical economics, as it still suffers from many of the same issues: framing governments versus markets, utility maximizing individuals, lack of emergent properties, ignoring work, and also comes to pretty much the same policy conclusions: government equals bad. Okay, close quote. So again, I think, in my humble opinion, that unlearned econ is misidentifying now neoclassical economics with Austrian economics, and perhaps this is due to a Wikipedia article. Unlearning econ may be a victim of a wiki article. In this article, neoclassical economics and Austrian economics are conflated to be equivalent theories from a quote from an economist in 1900. And this is just really when Austrian theory was still in its infancy, so really probably isn't a good place to start with trying to establish an equivalency between Austrian economics and neoclassicist economics. The theories, I grant, are related, as Austrian economics draws insights from classical economists such as Ricardo and Bastiat, but not John Adams. And while similar to the uninitiated, I'm sure, they are not equivalent or exactly the same, and one could say that Austrian economics is a refinement or correction of neoclassical economics. Unlearning Econ says, for example, the central libertarian idea that people should be free to choose becomes nonsensical once you analyze it from the premise that people are not rational. And, of course, the quote there comes from the title of Milton Friedman's book, and is Unlearning Econ under the impression that Milton Friedman represents libertarianism. I don't know too many libertarians myself that would say that, but okay, we'll go move on. I guess my question is, what is freedom and what is choice? For if we are not free to choose, as the saying goes, then, where is the place for normative ethics? If people are not free to choose, then they are infinitely influenced, and such that if they are so infinitely influenced they cannot make choices, they become inanimate objects that are acted upon by constant pervasive influences. Choice is really a precondition of ethics, and if we remove choice as part of our initial premise, ethical premises, then we really removed any kind of possibility for ethics as such. You don't say to the tree, you should grow differently than you're growing, because the tree has no choice in the matter. And if human beings have no choices in the matter, then how can we say they should do something rather than they should not? Bare assertions. Okay, so bare assertions are not themselves arguments, I just like to point out. They are rather the introduction of premises without critical examination. And, forgive me for saying so. Perhaps I'm misunderstood or, am not getting this, but it seems that unlearning Econ's argument relies a lot on these bare assertions. One quote is that people do not behave like robots, so they need strong political and social institutions that create trust and cohesion to engage in transaction. Trust has actually been cited as a major reason for the slow growth of many developing economies. Well, if people do not behave as robots, then do they have choice? And if they have choice, then doesn't this contradict the previous assertion where they had no choice and they were infinitely influenced? From whence does this mysterious utilitarian argument come from that if one wishes to have economic growth, then political and social institutions must be put in place? Is the assumption that political institutions are necessary for trust and cohesion? And if we're simply asserting that, then this really isn't an argument, right? So Unlearned Econ also says pre-tax income is just a money flow that has arisen due to the institutions set up by government, and as a result of the way these institutions were set up. Well, unlearning econ has shifted temporarily from an economic and political assertions to perhaps an ethical argument. To expose the fallacy of this argument, if I, may do so, why does unlearning econ's reasoning stay consistent with this paraphrase? Um, Pre-extorted income productivity is just a money flow that has arisen due to the institutions set up by the mafia and as a result of the way this criminal organization was set up. You know, if we can change the labels and get the same logical result, then perhaps, or if we change the labels and somehow it doesn't intuitively work anymore, then maybe we were hung up on some implicit premises of the label and not in the actual flow of the argument. So if the pre-existence of the threat of force intended to coerce victims to surrender money to the mafia does not ethically justify that extortion, then, the argument doesn't quite work, and at least, I might say that that's exactly what's going on here. Unlearning Econ also said libertarianism completely neglects work and workers. And while Austrian economics does reject the labor theory of value implicit within, Marxism and communism, Austrian economics does place market forces in the theoretical hands of the consumers, in the underlying consumer sovereignty, which Unlearning Econ absolutely does point out correctly. But unlearning econ does create an artificial class conflict in this conceptual distinction, for the workers are the consumers. You can't say that the workers are consuming things, they just happen to be employed in a particular capitalist venture. And so, you have voluntary transactions of they accept the job for the rate and the capitalist accepts to pay them and they don't have to, it's about time preference and things like this. This is all Austrian economic insights. I don't want to, go too deep into this. This is already biting into my Friday night, but we'll suffice it there. The workers are the consumers and the consumers have sovereignty in a free market system. So, the labels again are tripping us up here, but when this is cleared away, we realize that at least I think the critique kind of evaporates. So Unlearning Econ says, how do libertarians deal with the fact that their ideology is built on highly flawed theories? By mocking the real world. Is this even an argument? At best, this is a judgment based on an observation of perceived behavior. And, what can I say? If Unlearning Econ has perceived this behavior from libertarians, Unlearning Econ, I don't know who you're talking to, but they sound like morons. So, I can't really blame you too much if you're a little critical of them. So, Dear Unlearning Econ, I would say that the foundation of libertarianism, again, I'm not a libertarian myself, but my sympathies are similar. The foundation of libertarianism is actually an ethical argument, not an economic one, which is based often on natural law, natural rights, argumentation, or less frequently, but, I'm not going to diss it here, less frequently a utilitarian argument regarding the best satisfaction of human wants and needs. So the economic theory then is the consequence of a basic ethical theory where property rights as an optimization, economization of human wants and needs. And if you really want to attack libertarianism, you want to hit that ethical argument. Sincerely, Darjeeling Zen. Wait, stop the presses. In my haste to create the video, I realized that Unlearning Econ said some very interesting things towards the very end, which I might want to respond to. Unlearning Econ said lecturing workers for not accepting pay cuts. Now, let me be clear, this is Unlearning Econ's representation of what libertarians are saying. So, Unlearned Econ says that libertarians say that lecturing workers for not accepting pay cuts, which their theory is wrong about incidentally, attacking institutions that conflict with their policy prescriptions, ridiculing inequality considerations as simple envy. Furthermore, they simply implement their policies without considering the starting point, much like Neoclassical Economics. Effectively, they are saying that even though the world does not behave like the textbooks, we should act like it does and ridicule or ignore it when it doesn't. Obviously, that has worked out pretty well. So, to Unlearning Econ, geez, I don't know who you're speaking to again, but lecturing workers for not accepting pay cuts. There's no part of Austrian economics that I can think of that would say that workers should or should not accept pay cuts. They should get the maximization that market forces are willing to pay them. So I'm not sure where you're getting that criticism. Attacking institutions that conflict with their policy prescriptions. Well, if the institution enacts the initiation of force through acts of, initiations of force through acts of force, coercion, or theft, then yeah, that's bad ethical policy, right? So, it's wrong to hurt people and coerce them into doing things and to steal their stuff. That's just bad policy. And it's legitimate to ethically attack institutions that would have those policies, okay? I guess where the libertarian might come down on that. If you're talking about something else, if I misunderstood, forgive me. I'm going to move on. Ridiculing inequality considerations as simple envy. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who you're talking to. Libertarianism is about providing maximum economic productivity, which would reduce, so-called inequality considerations. That the more economically productive you can make a economic system, the better it is for everyone. From the very poorest people to the very richest people. It's an optimization of economic productivity, right? At least that's the libertarian theory, or Austrian economic theory, whichever you want to call it. They say, Unlearned Econ wants to say that furthermore, they simply implement their policies without considering the starting point, much less I don't know where Unlearning is coming from there. Maybe an example might be good. And Unlearning says that effectively they're saying that the world doesn't behave like textbooks, we should act like it does. Well, actually, I think the libertarians are saying that the Keynesians are the ones who are effectively saying that even though in our theory, stagflation is theoretically impossible, even though we see it in the real world occasionally, that doesn't undermine our theory at all. That's kind of the Keynesian argument of things. So perhaps this economic argument is misdirected towards the Keynesians. Just a thought. Have a good night.